Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Emily Gold Mears. Emily is a former attorney who shifted her advocacy efforts to seek information on optimizing health through research, analysts in science and medicine. In this episode, we're going to talk about things like sleep issues, reducing exposures to toxins, stress, and other ways that we can improve our health ourselves through our health and the various things that we can do in that area. So welcome to the show, Emily. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you, Scott. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, as you mentioned, I used to be a lawyer. I did not love the practice of law, and I was always fascinated by science and medicine and health. And when my father became ill, he had vascular dementia. I saw how the conventional healthcare system treated his disease, and I was very dismayed. So I began researching frantically, and those are skills that I learned and honed from being a lawyer. And what I found in particular for neurodegenerative diseases was very grim and not very hopeful because there's not a lot that we can do once one is diagnosed. But I broadened my research to find out about chronic disease and how one can prevent them or at least postpone the onset of them. And what I found was actually quite hopeful and very optimistic. There are many things that we can do. Most of these diseases have a small genetic component and are driven by environment and lifestyle. And the reason why that's so optimistic is that we can take some control over our environment and even more control over our lifestyle choices.
For sure. And I know things like the environment, you may not have total control over that because you may grow up in an area that there are some exposures to certain things, and you may not have a choice especially as a young child. You're going to live where your family lives, and that's the extent of that. But everybody has choices in terms of their lifestyle, the foods that they eat, the beverages that they drink, and the exercise and all the things that go into your lifestyle. You have choices over all of those things. And those things can really make an impact, especially long term when you start off young and you're living a healthy lifestyle. And that just becomes a habit. And that's just how you are. That's how you live. That has a super profound impact later on in life, right?
Indeed, it does. And there's nothing that we can do about how we grew up or what's already passed. We can't do anything about that, but we can start from today and move forward. And I have to confess that most of the things that I learned were because I did everything wrong. My nutrition was poor. I overexercised. My sleep wasn't functional. Everything was wrong. And I began becoming symptomatic and I didn't like it. And so that's when I thought, okay, how can I turn this ship around? And I did. It turns out there's so many things that we can do, and one should be empowered to take control of their health, at least to some degree.
Yeah. And I have an uncle who a few years ago, he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a pretty grim diagnosis. The doctor said that really there's not a lot of hope here for someone your age with this level of cancer, the degree that it's spread throughout his body and all that stuff. It wasn't the best diagnosis he could have received. However, the same uncle was the type of person all his life who was looking at the back of the containers, looking at the calories, looking at the food that's or the ingredients that's in the food. And he was really paying attention to all that stuff. Tried to eat natural foods like fruits and vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And he really took care of himself. He exercised all the time and he was in incredible shape. And the doctors, after he beat this cancer, attributed it to the fact that he was in such great shape at that point in his life. And how sad would that be if life is cut short because all those years prior, they were not paying attention to what they ate or exercising or doing any of the right things. And that would just be like such a shame. And with this episode, I'm hoping that we can encourage some people to take a closer look at how they're living their lives and start making those changes. Like you said, you can't change the past, but you can certainly influence the future. And so that's what I'm hoping to do here.
Absolutely. And I'm so sorry to hear that the doctors gave your uncle such a grim and hopeless future. That's a terrible thing to do because there are always things that we can change. Maybe not to eliminate metastatic cancer, but perhaps to prolong life and maybe improve life. There's so
Right.
many things that can be done. And our bodies are really quite miraculous. Our biology is designed to really heal if we give it the right information. So people can and they should take control.
Yeah, let's start with talking about sleep issues. I mentioned in the intro, and I want to cover it because I know a lot of veterans, myself included, have had difficulties with sleep. And it could be related to things like mental health conditions like PTSD, but it could also be due to some other issues that we haven't even considered. So I want to dig into that topic a bit with you. I know you mentioned that sleep was an issue that you've researched and done some background research with. What are some ways that we can help improve our sleep without resorting to medications?
Well, I suggest that nobody resorts to medication because what that will do is just buy you different problems down the line. It's sort of a band-aid fix, which is kind of how our healthcare system treats everything. But a large percentage of the population gets inadequate sleep. I was part of that population. And this affects cognitive function, the immune system, the vascular system, the endocrine system, and the health of our cells and our microbiome. We have circadian rhythms which regulate all aspects of our health. They follow a 24-hour cycle, and each cell in our body has a circadian clock. There are so many ways that you can improve your sleep. There's so many things that contribute to disordered sleep, but ways to improve that don't have any bad side effects are consistent habits, going to sleep at the same time, waking at the same time, going to sleep in a very dark room in a cold room. That's supposed to be much healthier for you. And when you wake up in the morning, this is a great trick that science has proven is quite effective. In the morning, within 30 to 60 minutes of waking, if you go outside and you expose yourself to light, you don't look straight into the sun. And even on a cloudy day, the photons from the sun are strong enough so that they can have a positive impact. And if you do that consistently, what that does is that resets your circadian clock. And you keep doing this. It may not happen on the first day or the second day, but if you do this day after day for a few weeks, you will improve your sleep. Now, there's a million other things to do. When you eat, what you eat close to bedtime will impact how well you sleep. If you eat too late at night, that's a lot of effort for your digestive system, and that can interfere with your sleep. But there are so many things that one could do. You don't want to go to bed too hungry, but you don't want to go to bed too full. And then you also have to monitor your cortisol because insufficient sleep increases the release of the stress hormone like cortisol, which then decreases one's insulin sensitivity, which regulates our blood sugar. And that's implicated in everything.
So many things that we can do, but I like that very simple first thing that you mentioned, just keeping a consistent schedule. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. And I've even gone so far as to say to people that on the weekends, during the week, you might have a job that you have to get up early for. And so you wake up early and you go through your day and then you go to bed at night probably the same time throughout the week because you're tired and you have that natural schedule that just comes into play there. But I even suggest that people do the same thing on the weekends. Wake up around the same time on the weekends, go to bed around the same time. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, do the same thing as you would do during the week. I have to imagine that a lot of the reason why people hate Mondays is because it's just so hard to wake up after your sleep schedule has just been so disrupted over the weekend with staying out late on a Friday or Saturday night and then trying to get back into that same routine that you've always been into. So like just if you just kept the same schedule throughout the whole week, it would be a whole lot easier to get back into that routine come Monday, right?
That's exactly right. And science confirms that if you create what they call a sleep deficit every single weekend, it's hard on your body. And if you can remain consistent, you'll feel better. And feeling better is the best reward of all. I mean, it should incentivize people to continue their good habits.
Yeah, and it's not to say you can't go out on a Saturday night or something like that to do something, but just keep in mind that if your normal bedtime is 10 o'clock and you come home and it's midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that, well, you're gonna probably have to deal with that at some point. You're not going to be able to just bounce back. Maybe if you were 18, 19, 20 years old, maybe you can bounce back a little bit easier. But I know I'm not that age anymore and I'm not bouncing back quite as easily that way. So there's a trade off. So you have to understand that it's probably not going to be the best thing come Monday morning when you have to get up and you have to be someplace when you're dealing with a lack of sleep like that. So great advice there. I think that keeping that consistent schedule and getting outside too, I think is a super important point to make too, because just being outside, even if it's just walking around the neighborhood, go walk the dog or something like that for a half hour or something, just to get outside and get a little sunlight on you is such a huge benefit.
Absolutely. If you don't have a half an hour, 10 minutes will
Yeah.
work. So just little incremental improvements will make a difference.
Right. Yeah. Do what you can when you can. And that will be huge. Know we talked a little bit also in the intro about toxins that people are exposed to. And I know you can't always control the things that you've been exposed to, right? That's in the past, but you can control exposures to toxins in the future, perhaps. A lot of veterans have been exposed to various toxins in their job in the military. And we talk about things like toxins from burn pits and contaminated water on military bases and other things like that. But it's more than just that because we come into contact with toxins on a daily basis. So, what can we do to help reduce this exposure to these everyday toxins?
Well, I believe that toxin exposure is a component of every disease. It's one of the many reasons why we're seeing so much illness in this country. And currently, the US permits more than 85,000 chemicals in our food, water, and commercial products that we put on our skin, used to clean, store food in, wear, sleep on, grow crops with, and more. We are literally surrounded by toxins that have not been adequately tested for safety and many that are banned in other countries. And then, of course, there's the concept that the combination of these chemicals just increases the danger exponentially. There are things that you can do. You can get a water filter. There's a variety of different water filters to at least filter the water that you drink, and even a shower filter so that your skin, which is your biggest organ, you can reduce the toxins on your skin from bad water coming through your shower or your bath. You can get an air filter, which will, in the indoors, it will filter out some of the toxins because there's indoor pollution too that's a problem. You can minimize the use of plastics. There are so many bad chemicals in plastics. Phthalates are petroleum based chemicals that make plastic soft and flexible. They're in everything. You can switch to glass. Plastic is not good. The styrofoam containers that people get coffee or take out food in, those are really filled with nasty chemicals. You can have cookware. Nonstick cookware is not good because it's coated with a substance that, when heated, releases bad chemicals. Your personal care products, like your shampoo and your toothpaste and your lotion and your soap, there are non toxic brands available. And I'm not suggesting that one can eliminate all toxin exposure. That's probably unrealistic, but there are things that can be done, and it's good to make whatever changes that you can. Cleaning products, the products that you clean your home in, are filled with chemicals, but now there's so many non-toxic brands. And there is a wonderful site called the Environmental Working Group that anybody can access, and it will give you foods that are less toxic and filled with pesticides than others. They had the clean 15 and the toxic 12 or something like that. And they rotate from time to time. There are certain fruits and vegetables that you really should buy organic because they're susceptible to pests. So they have more pesticides, like grapes and berries and apples and peanuts. And those are just some. And there are others which are less important: avocados and pineapples and bananas. Because of their thick skin, you're less susceptible to pest invasion and require less pesticides. Your mattress should be a non toxic mattress. If you consider how many hours you spend on your mattress, where I live in California, there is state law that they have to be doused with flame retardant because someone smoked a cigarette fell asleep and burnt up in their mattress. So now the rest of us have to have chemical doused mattresses, but there are ways around that. Try to get a non-toxic mattress. And if you can reduce your pesticide and herbicide use, it will benefit you.
Absolutely. And those are things, like you said, they're all over the place. You don't even think about them. If you get an apple from the store and you just kind of maybe rinse it off under the tap water or whatever, and you go and eat it. You don't even think twice about what's on it because quite frankly, can't see all of the chemicals that may be on things like a piece of fruit or a vegetable. You just may not be able to see it, but they may be there. And with no taste or whatever to tell the difference, you may eat it just as if you always have it, just you don't even notice that it's there, and it's just it is a shame because we do have so many toxins around us, even like you said, plastics, like even plastic water bottles that are very convenient. They're very easy to just grab a bottle of water and drink out of that, but again, it's in plastic, and there are lots of chemicals that make up that plastic, and that's probably not the best thing to be drinking for you anyways, right?
Exactly. And when those plastic water bottles that we're all carrying around are in the sun, the heat of the sun stimulates the chemical. So glass or stainless steel are great alternatives. Not to mention better for the environment. We have
Sure.
so much plastic in our landfill. So if you switch, you won't contribute to that problem.
Yeah, for sure, and that's just another added benefit right there, but just making that small step of using some sort of reusable glass or, like you said, stainless steel. Our family, we live in Arizona, we're in the desert, it's hot. We always are going to get some sort of water, and everywhere we go, we always make sure that we have water with us just in case that emergency, a car breaks down or something like that. You don't wanna be sitting in 115-degree heat when the car is broken down with no water available to you. So everyone in our family has these stainless steel water bottles and we fill them up before we go and we make sure we have them. Even if we're only just going out for a little bit and we may not even drink the water on that particular trip, but we have it with us just in case, right?
Sounds like a good tip. I should follow that tip.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, and it's an easy thing to do. At first, it's a little inconvenient because you're not used to it, but then it just becomes a habit and you just do it and you don't think twice about it. It's like grabbing your cell phone or your keys. It's just the thing that you do before you leave the house, and now you have it with you just in case you need it. So,
That's a great point, and that applies to all of these health tips. You just make it a habit. At the beginning, it feels foreign, but once you do it enough times, you just build it into your routine and it becomes habitual and it's no longer hard to do.
right, and it's like anything. You're trying to create a better outcome for yourself, no matter if it's for your physical health, your mental health, if you're an athlete and you're trying to get better in a sport. Well, if you keep doing the same thing that you've always done in that sport, you're going to get the same results that you've always gotten. So if you want to get better, you're going to have to change something and it's going to feel uncomfortable until you get used to it. And that's just the way it is. Um, but once when you get used to it, now call it leveled up, if you will. Now you're that much better. And then if you wanna get better than that, then you push yourself outside that comfort zone just a little bit more until you get better. But I think it's the same thing with just about everything in life. And if you can make those small incremental changes, they're not as hard to swallow as big wholesale changes where you're changing everything, uh, about if you wanna become healthier with the foods that you eat, and if you just wipe everything out that you've always eaten and you just go to a strict plant-based diet, all organic, everything, that's gonna be a big shock to your system. It's gonna be harder to do as opposed to replacing one thing incrementally over time and getting better that way, right?
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, so now I've seen a lot of veterans and actually not just veterans, but people from all over the place, so all walks of life, who have gone to the doctor and they get a diagnosis that maybe doesn't quite seem right, or the doctor says everything's fine when they know not everything is fine. These people might want to be able to go out and do their own research to find out more about what they're dealing with, like what you were talking about in the intro with your father and everything that was going on there. And since you've done some extensive research and into all these medical issues, how can other people dive in and do this kind of research? Where can they go? What resources are available? And where do we even begin when we want to do this type of research?
Well, I completely agree with that suggestion because the reality is the American people are getting sicker by the day. And the current system and approach is not working at all. And so the patient must be involved. They have to take control of their health because I don't mean to demonize doctors. I understand that they're pressured by the insurance companies or whatever institution that they work for to only allocate a very small amount of time to each patient. And the reality is, nobody knows your body better than you. The doctor doesn't know how you're going to respond to things or how you truly feel. So one needs to take control and become their own healthcare advocate. And one way they can do that is they can research, but they need to be very careful because Google is not always our friend. There's a ton of misinformation out there, a lot of junk science. So one needs to be able to vet through the bad science to discern the actual science. What I've done, I'm not sure if most people are inclined to do this, but I dig deep and I look at PubMed. I look at the clinical studies and I really try and shift through and I am able to know what is bad science because there's a lot out there. My book is backed by 200 footnotes. So it's all evidence based, backed by studies. And I've kind of done the research for people. And I separated into 19 chapters, each one dealing with another concept. And if people aren't inclined to do their research, they can look at that. But by all means, when you go to the doctor, if the doctor dismisses you, don't accept that because you know that your symptoms are real and they don't have enough time to explore with you and ask for testing or ask for further explanation and maybe do some kind of research and come equipped. If you can find a clinical study, if you can find some valuable information, bring it with you so that the doctor knows you're at least willing to collaborate with them and perhaps that they'll listen to you more.
Yeah, and I have a perfect example of what you're talking about there in my own situation. Unfortunately, it was a situation that happened with me, but I went to the hospital. I was having felt like trouble breathing. Like I couldn't get a full breath. I would take a breath in and I wasn't getting a full breath. And it was rather worrisome. Obviously, if you can't breathe, that's a big problem. If you are concerned about anything longer than the next few minutes of your life, then it's going to be a big problem, right? So I went to the hospital and they ran all these tests. The oxygen levels in my blood were perfectly fine. Everything was normal. Everything came back fine. And they said I must just be anxiety and I must just be anxious. And so that must be the problem. And the only thing I was really anxious about was the fact that I couldn't get a full breath. And like outside of that, I was like, I'm not an anxious person. I don't know what would have caused this. Like nothing is causing me to be anxious right now outside of the fact that I'm having some breathing issues. But that wouldn't have caused the breathing issues. So I knew that wasn't, I couldn't get them to really do anything else at that point. And so I went home. I didn't take any of the medicine that they prescribed me because I was like, I know this is not it. That this is not an anxiety situation. And I started doing some research. And it turns out that people who have like heartburn or things like that, it could have symptoms of shortness of breath. And so I said, okay, well, I've frequently had heartburn in the past. And okay, so what's going on with that? And so I wanted to address the root cause of the heartburn problem. I had been dealing with it for years and years. I wanted to get rid of it. And so what I found out was that when I was a teenager, I was prescribed a lot of antibiotics for like acne and that kind of thing. And I took those. And that totally messed with the good bacteria, like the gut bacteria that everyone has naturally. It's normal to have. It's a good thing to have. It helps in digestion and everything else. But it was causing me to have heartburn. And I had just dealt with heartburn. I took the heartburn medicine. So it's like one medicine after another, and it just builds on itself. And when I started addressing that and I started addressing the bacteria issue in my stomach, heartburn has gone away completely. Like I haven't had heartburn since then. And all of these issues could have just been solved with like some yogurt or some probiotic drinks or things like that. All of those issues could have been solved with something very simple like that. And I'm not saying that's the root cause for everybody, but in my case, that's what it turned out to be. If I just went along with what the doctor said, it would have been just taking, again, one medicine after another. And that would have caused other problems, which would have caused me to take other medicines. And by the time I was 50, 60 years old, I would have been on a whole series of medications that were completely unnecessary.
That is a really compelling example, and I had a similar experience. I've had allergies, And so before I knew any better, 30 years ago, I was on antibiotics for a year and a half, and it
Yeah.
destroyed my gut microbiome. And what I believe strongly is that if you cannot optimize your gut, and most of us have gut dysbiosis, which simply means an imbalance of good versus bad bacteria, if we can't optimize it, nothing else will work well because it all starts in the gut. Your gut is connected to your brain through something called the vagus nerve. And if you have bad gut issues, you'll have a hard time getting other things work optimally. So it's a great place to start. And that's exactly what I talk about is the doctors just want to give you a pill rather than trying to determine what is causing this. You have to get to the bottom of this. It's like a mystery. Think of yourself as a spy trying to get to the bottom of the case, and then maybe it will be more enjoyable to figure it out.
Yeah, and another example you mentioned allergies is I used to have pretty bad allergies too, and I would take the allergy over the counter allergy medicine every spring, every time the flowers started blooming, I take that. What I started doing is incorporating local raw honey into my diet, and every day I have just a little bit of honey, and that almost acts as almost like a vaccine, the way a vaccine would work, where it just conditions your body to fight against that thing. It basically is giving yourself like a mini dose of whatever it is that you're allergic to, and your body just learns how to react to it. So then come the springtime when your body is now breathing in all the pollen and all the other stuff in the air, your body now knows how to handle it. And now the allergies don't bother me at all. I mean, if I travel to a different area and it doesn't have that same type, every now and again, I'll have some issues that pop up. But for the most part, around home, I don't have any allergy related issues at all because I just incorporated that small change into my diet.
That's great. And there are no side effects from that, as opposed to
Right.
some of the really nasty side effects from all that over the counter or prescription allergy medicine that I took for years before I knew better. So that's great. That's a good story. It's nice to hear a good story.
Yeah, exactly. And these are the types of things I know these are just anecdotal. They're my situation that I dealt with and what I went through, and this is how it helped me. Other people are out there too that have had similar experiences. And I'm sure you, through your research, you've come across some of those people and you've talked to those people. You may have been in contact with them personally, but it's just goes to show that if we spend a little bit of time and do a little bit of research, all these medicines that we are being prescribed or told to take over the counter type medicines, you may not even need them in most cases. There may be some one-off cases that maybe you might need them, but I would say in most cases you probably don't. And it's just a shame that so many people are taking all these medicines that really aren't necessary.
Not only not necessary, but sometimes quite harmful. Now,
Right.
what as you said, I want to reiterate that there are certain acute conditions that do require them. So it's not a blanket statement, but there are many cases where they're prescribed in an inappropriate manner.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you mentioned earlier that you wrote a book. You started talking a little bit about that book, but your book is titled Optimizing Your Health, an Approachable Guide to Reducing Your Risk of Chronic Disease. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell us about that book and also where people can find the book.
Okay, thank you. So the book is 19 chapters. The 19th chapter is a resource guide where I list products and services and everything that I have personally vetted, non toxic brands and things that apply to every chapter so that people don't have to do that research. And then the other 18 chapters cover things like your oral health. Oral health has been correlated to systemic wellness. It's very important to address that. I cover the gut. I cover the immune system and inflammation, hydration, nutrition, light optimization, hormones, fasting, stress, supplements. I go in depth into supplements, breathing, cold thermogenesis, which is something that is a great thing that has no side effects unless you do it excessively. Exercise, the proper way to exercise and not to over exercise, as I did. Genetics and this fascinating new emerging field of epigenetics and genomics, which I think is so interesting. And once it advances, it's going to find cures to diseases that we cannot figure out right now. Sleep, I go into testing and tracking, which is a favorite chapter of mine. You can't fix what you can't measure. So while it might cost a little bit upfront to get certain tests done, you know exactly where you stand. I suggest that no one should ever take a supplement without first figuring out what your baseline is, because the term supplement by definition means you're adding to something that is deficient. And why not figure out where you are. So you don't need to take certain things. So it will save money in the long run. And I also go into clinical studies, which is just sort of an interesting area for me because I found it shocking that many of those are manipulated. I mean, the widespread corruption never fails to amaze me. And even though they're relied upon, they're not always 100% reliable. And what you said about anecdotal stories, enough anecdotes add up to empirical evidence. And the bottom line is one needs to figure out what works best for them. Because the common theme in my book is that we're each genetically and biochemically different. So, what works for your brother or your sister or your friend may not work for you and may be downright harmful. So, it's good to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, to have a little bit of trial and error. Like I said, for me, the honey worked for my allergies. It may not work for everybody. It may not work the same way. You may not implement it the same way in your life. I have it every day, just part of my morning routine. It's what I do. You may do it a one-off kind of thing, or you may overdo it and you may have too much of it and throughout your day. You got to play around with it and see what works for you and what doesn't work. And in my case, that works. It may not work for everybody, but be willing to experiment a little bit. And like you said earlier, be a spy or a detective and try to just troubleshoot and figure out what it is that's going on with your body, with everything that's going on with you, and try to hone in on whatever it might mean to get better your situation. Right.
Absolutely. I'm an experimenter, and I might suggest, based on my experience, to do so prudently because some of the experiments that I have tried have not worked out well. But you never know which are the ones that will be effective and which won't. And so just keep trying and do so carefully. Don't do crazy stuff, but it's amazing what I found works and what doesn't work.
Right, exactly. And for like you said, for a little bit of money upfront in some testing to get that baseline as far as where your various levels are is important because, then you know what areas to focus on. If your cholesterol is too high, okay, well then okay, we need to work on that. If your iron or other things in your body are too high or too low, then you know what to work on. But if you don't have that baseline, you don't know, and you're kind of just shooting in the dark, and you're not sure really what to do, and you may be overdoing it in certain areas, and that's not good for you either, right?
Exactly. I'm sure, as a lot of your audience knows, we never go into a situation without assessing it in advance. And the same is for your own biology.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I do appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and share everything that you have shared with us. Your book has way more information than we're going to be able to cover in this episode. And so I really do encourage people to go out and get a copy of that book if you're interested in optimizing your health. The book, again, titled Optimizing Your Health, an approachable guide to reducing your risk of chronic disease. If you're interested in that at all, please do take a look at that book. I'll have a link to it in the show notes and definitely get a copy of the book. Again, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Scott. I enjoyed speaking with you too. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.